I think just the length of the regular season. We've done it before. We've got plenty of time, and we'll actually be like 3 straight weeks in phase 1. So more importantly, I think for our guys is just getting back, getting into shape, lifting, and I want to make sure that they don't feel like they're coming to the facility right now in April, to practice. They're coming to train, and we had real good turnout. There were a few guys that touched base with me ahead of time, but it's good seeing them. It's good seeing all those guys back.
Just based on the depth of this draft, there will be a couple guys there, 62.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think when you get 62 players out, a lot can happen. But we feel comfortable that there's going to be a good football player. Hopefully, someone that we feel like can help us, sooner than later.
You must be that you all have always been aggressive in the draft. Do you kind of have to maybe wrap your mind around it differently for Thursday night, knowing that it could come and go and you may not have a player?
Yeah, I think it's really it's specific to that round. And if you really went back, you look at 06 in the second round, we backed up and drafted Roman Harper. In the 4th round, we were ready to make a pick, and then we backed up and drafted Jari Evans. And so we're not adverse to either, but a lot of it has to do specifically with a player that you might feel his value is dropping some, or a player maybe that you feel like you can get if you do back up. So I think we're open to vote, and the key is having a good vision for who you're drafting. Like how do you see them fitting in, and how do you see them helping your roster?
So how hard is it to find some guys that'll actually stick with as good as your roster is already?
Well, look, I think when the topic comes up of guys having contribution, early you reference special teams, and yet, fortunately we've been able to find good players, not just in the early rounds, but in the latter rounds, and hopefully we can do the same this weekend.
How different is it when you go through that first round without a first round pick, that actual play?
Yeah, I think you go back to the trade a year ago, and it's hard to measure the value of that trade until you complete the second year, and then now it would have been pick 29, 30. We were real pleased with the ability for us to get up and get Marcus. I think that's just part of it. That each year you might be with multiple picks in a round, or maybe you don't have a pick in a round. It's more noticeable to the public when the first round pick's not there, because look, we spent 90% of our time discussing the first round, and yet our scouts, everyone knows in this process, the key to having a good draft is finding players in these other rounds, which we've been able to do, and hopefully we can do that beginning Friday.
Sean, do you get anxious as this week gets here, as you get closer to the start of the draft, even though you don't have that first round pick this year?
I don't know. Excited would be a better word, not anxious. Anxious would be more of a word, like before you play a game. But no, there's a lot of work that goes into the reports. There's a lot of work that scouts and coaches, everyone that's taken the film out, gone to a campus workout, gone to the combine, and maybe seen a player 4 different times, and then taking a pen to a paper or on the computer, filling in what they think that player can be for us. So I think for all those people that spend time on that, it's a pretty tedious process, and yet I think it's an exciting time because you're adding to your team.
Do you have more confidence going in the later rounds with picks, knowing that you had success in those later rounds before?
Yeah, look, I think that, man, we've got, pockets in the 4th, 5th, 6th. We've got these clumps of players. And then, of course, you guys all know when the draft ends, there's only 7 rounds. There was a time historically when this draft went much deeper, 12 rounds. So there are a lot of good football players that aren't going to be selected when the draft ends on Saturday. And anytime you can find a player after the draft that can contribute in some way, and each year we've been able to do that, that's that might as well be a fifth, a sixth, or a seventh round pick. So I'm sure that'll be something we spend a lot of time on.
So what kind of leaps are you expecting in year two from Davenport and Traquan and Clapp?
Yeah, all those guys. Look, I think with Marcus, he's healthy now. He's rehabbing. He's coming along. Traquan played more snaps probably than even we would have anticipated to start the year, and yet I think that experience will serve him well. And then when you're talking about Clapp, when you're talking about some of our younger linemen inside, I think that a season under their belt's going to help them as they head into this off season. We see those guys in the weight room working hard, and I think those guys are good football players, and they're going to compete for not only a roster spot, but compete for the ability to get a jersey on game day as well.
You like the work you guys have done this free agency period to make things kind of a best player available? Yeah, we think we've helped ourselves with a handful of guys, and it's always tough when a guy like Mark leaves, someone who's meant so much to our program, and a guy that has been a big part of our success. But yeah, I think that that there were certain fits you were looking for, and we feel like we've got a real good locker room right now, and I think the guys we're bringing in, I think our fans will be excited to watch.
So what do you think about the schedule?
Every year, it comes out. There's not a lot you can control. The West Coast swing, we kind of, when they called about that, occasionally they'll ask a question or two, and, we'll go play week 2, the Rams. Obviously, we open up with Houston at home, a tough opponent. There's a lot of playoff teams on the schedule, and that's part of, a first-place schedule. But we'll probably play out west and stay out west, and then play this third game in Seattle and come back home and get ready for Sunday night. It's nice that our fans, will have a number of primetime games at home. I think more than anything, you look at where your away games are, what are the travel challenges, and then after that, you really focus more on the front part of it.
What's the challenge of that second and third week? I mean, I know you're going to stay out west, but
these are all playoff teams. Yeah, they're all playoff teams that play good, good football. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. These are all teams that were right at the top, competing in their divisions. All well coached. So I think now you're really focused more on your own team. And then as we get into training camp, we'll look more specifically to, our opener.
Is there a body clock issue with playing back-to-back West Coast games? That's why you want to stay out there?
I think it's a little bit easier. I think the challenge when you go west is not the game west. It's always the following week, coming back. So the ability to go out, play in LA and then stay on that time zone, rather than create 2 road, trips back and forth. So that doesn't change who you're playing, but it basically just creates 1 trip west back home as opposed to 2. We haven't. We've talked about a few, and we'll, in the coming, weeks or month here, get an idea. Look, you practiced in California, and there's 14% state income tax. So I think there are a lot of guys that would say, let's get to Washington, where there's no income tax.
And every year we ask you, but I mean, where do you feel like your must positions are? Kind of in the draft?
Look, we'll have this discussion. I'm a player in this draft, and I can make this team. I think that you're always looking for depth at offensive line. Kicking game is the first spot to a roster. So, a linebacker that can play in the kicking game. Just hopefully for us, good football players that we have the right vision for, regardless of position. It's a good question. Look, we're going to be looking to see who gives us, sub-rush ability. Whether it's at the end, tackle position defensively, who gives us some, what player can come in maybe. I heard Zach yesterday talking in the evening hour about, a guy that maybe can back up a tackle. We'll have some guys competing at that position, but we're going to try to look at the right guys that we feel like at least fit a vision, and then let everything else take care of itself.
As it pertains to Thursday, do you go in with the mindset of expecting the unexpected? And I guess what I mean by that is expecting teams to call you and say, do we spend much time hypothetically with scenarios of if some team were to call and we wanted to play to get into first place?
I think a fair enough assessment, or maybe would be, look, we would discuss today, if we move back, how far, it's kind of hard to predict until you see, the players that fall. If you move forward, what realistically would take place? And, you're not going to move from 62 into 10, 15 or any of that. Are you interested in moving to 31 maybe? It would just be specific to a player. But I think, the plan would be to go in, and certainly as we arrive for the first day of the draft, we're arriving knowing it's only one round, but nonetheless, we're putting our suits on.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, thank you.
Sean,